Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me, or good morning, depending on where you're joining from. This is Dr. Marline C. Duroseau. I first want to start off by sharing that I'm actually joining you live today from Philadelphia. I am here at the I Am Phenom event, and I'm super, super excited to be here and to be able to broadcast live and bring you this information is just amazing. So being in this particular environment at the I Am Phenom event, surrounded by HR, talent, technology leaders, it kind of just reinforces exactly, everything that we've been talking about and just showing how the conversation matters, right? And we have to keep having it. So across the sessions, the booths, the executive decisions, the same question keeps coming up. How do we ensure leadership development actually drives business performance, right? Not just participation. So for today's conversation, it isn't just theoretical, it's grounded in what actual organizations, right, including ourselves and ones that I'm meeting, are actively grappling with right now in real time. So with our presentation today, leadership development that actually moves the business. Again, I am Dr. Marline C. Duroseau. I go by Dr. Mar, and I am the Managing Director of HR and Leadership Development here at Brandon Hall Group. A little bit about Brandon Hall. For those of you who may not know, our vision is to inspire a better workplace experience. And our mission focuses on empowering excellence in organizations around the world through our groundbreaking research, case studies, and tools that we use each and every day. So some of the items here that we always love to talk about: how can you connect with Brandon Hall and be a part of our vision and our mission? We can have your participation in our Excellence Awards programs. We also have in-person events, which is the HCM Excellence Conference 2027. So far, the dates have been set for January 26th, 27th, and 28th next year. We have events at our beautiful Brick campus, the AI in HR and Leadership Summit, and also the regular Leadership Summit in November of 2026. And another way that you can be a part of the Brandon Hall vision and mission is to join our institute, right? You can elevate your expertise, transform your career, and impact your organization. All right. We want to know what you're thinking. Don't be shy. We have the chat. We can answer your questions live through the session with the chat box. So definitely feel free to type any comments or questions you have there. All right. We're going to go ahead and get right into it. So it's very important for us to make sure that we develop and tap into leadership because it's one of the main foundations of the organizations, right? So you have leadership development that actually moves the business. So leadership development is one of the most heavily funded areas in HR. Okay, and heavily funded meaning the money is being used to fund these programs, and organizations invest billions of dollars each year. But even with all of that funding, many leaders are still struggling to point to clear business results that are tied to the investments that the company is making into the leadership development. So today's session is about closing that gap. And, it's not a conversation about doing more leadership development. It's about ensuring that the investment that is being made to fund leadership development actually changes the business's outcomes. Okay, we are going to look at why so many programs stall at activity, what high-performing organizations do differently, and how HR can reposition leadership development as a business lever and not just a cost center. And when you change that frame of mind, it works, because if you look at something as just a cost center, you're not really trying to figure out what the ROI is in it. However, if you reposition it as a business lever, then you're able to really tap into making sure that the programs you're investing in are indeed bringing you outcomes for the business and for your employees. So the leadership investment paradox, okay, our Brandon Hall research shows that leadership development is consistently a top investment priority, like I just mentioned, but yet, leaders still report gaps in being ready as a leader and being able to execute as a leader. So We are going to look at our first polling question, okay, just to kind of test the temperature and kind of see, where we are. How would you describe the current impact of your leadership development efforts on business outcomes? How would you describe the current impact of your leadership development efforts on business outcome? There's a clear and measurable impact on performance. There's some impact, but not consistently measured. There's limited visible impact beyond participation, or you're unsure. Have a few seconds to answer that. Okay. That looks good. Some impact, but not consistently measured. And if you notice, that definitely is in line with what our research shows, where, we are indeed making an impact because the leadership development is happening, but how can we measure it? We don't really know that as of yet. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts there. So leadership development often stops at activity, okay, not outcomes. And again, it stops sometimes at activity because a lot of people are looking at it, or organizations look at leadership development as a cost center. So if someone is just saying, okay, well, we have to spend the money on leadership development, they start looking at it as just an activity that needs to be done. And oftentimes that's where it stalls, because we need to also focus on the outcomes in order to move it forward, okay? So most leadership development programs are measured by activity, meaning, yes, I checked the box that it was done, okay? Who attended it, who completed the training, who liked the training, okay? But CFOs and board members, they don't fund activity, they fund outcomes, okay? So completion does not equal capability, and participation doesn't equal performance. So when leadership development is disconnected from the outcomes of the business, it really becomes invisible at the level of executives, okay? No matter how good the content is. So it's really, really important to focus on what are the outcomes that we were able to achieve from these leadership development programs. The high participation does not equal high leadership performance. That's one of the things we kind of bullet pointed on the last slide. So this is where we have the participation versus the performance gap. Okay, so back to how many people attended the leadership development training, how many people liked it. Okay, that's great. We have that data, but what did it do for actual leadership performance? How is that helping to push the company's leadership participation and performance forward, right? So our research highlights a persistent gap between leadership program participation and measurable performance improvement. Right? So this is one of the most critical gaps that organizations face and that organizations have to deal with right now. The leaders attend the programs, but their behavior doesn't change consistently over time, right? The decisions that they're able to make aren't accelerated because there is a skill to decision making. And if leadership development is done correctly, then your ability to make those more higher level and strategic decisions should also accelerate. And in addition to that, the execution of the leaders don't improve even after having attended or participated in leadership development. And that missing link, it's not motivation. It's how do you apply it in context? How are you applying what you're learning in context as it relates to your organization or your industry? So leadership development often focuses on acquiring knowledge, right? And not taking that knowledge and transferring it into performance. Okay, so it's really, really important that we get to say, okay, yes, I've participated. Yes, I've acquired the knowledge. How do I transfer that into actual performance? So why traditional leadership metrics miss the mark? Okay, some common leadership metrics that, fall short include training hours, engagement scores, self-reported confidence, post-program surveys. And with that, the metrics aren't wrong, right? It's not that the metrics are wrong, it's just that they're incomplete. So these particular metrics, they tell us how leaders feel, not how they perform, okay? They measure inputs, training hours, Self-reported confidence, that's inputs, but it's not measuring business contribution. And executives, they want to know, are the decisions improving? Are we executing faster? And are teams delivering better results? So if the leadership metrics don't answer these particular questions, they won't influence funding decisions. And we need that funding, right? But we have to be able to answer those questions on, are the decisions that the leaders are now making improving? Are they more efficient, right? Is the execution faster? And are they delivering better results? And with that, we have our second polling question here on our deck. Which metrics is most often used today to evaluate leadership development success in your organization? Is it program completion or attendance? Is it engagement or satisfaction scores? Self-reported leadership confidence? Or business and performance-based outcomes? You have a few seconds to order that, to answer. Okay, let's see. Okay, we have a nice toss-up between engagement or satisfaction scores, which was that second option on the previous slides bullet, or program completion or attendance. Yes, that was the first bullet, right? The training. So, you know, that actually makes sense and aligns with what we're seeing, which is also showing, okay, since these are the type of metrics that are being used to evaluate leadership development, how do we take it that next step further to say, okay, now that we've completed the program or had a high attendance in the program, now that I know people are satisfied, how do we translate that and transfer that into performance and return as well? Thank you for your thoughts there. So what high-performing organizations do differently, okay, versus the outcomes that we're seeing? So our award-winning organizations, based on case studies that Brandon Hall award winners have partaken in, align leadership development directly to strategic priorities, okay, and enterprise performance indicators. So these particular companies that are high performing and award winners, they design leadership development backwards, okay? Meaning, a lot of times I like to mention, you have to start with the end in mind. And that's what these high-performing organizations are doing differently. They are designing their program backwards because they're designing it based on business outcomes. If you know, at the end of the day, one of the most important things, or one of the factors that matters to the company, is business outcome, because business outcomes will enhance customer satisfaction, it will enhance employee satisfaction. So if we know that business outcomes is the end result that we're trying to reach, so you want to design that leadership program backwards to make sure that you're also able to establish the outcomes from the business that you need, right? So a lot of the times what you find is that these award-winning companies, they align it directly to the strategic priorities and the enterprise performance indicators, okay? So a lot of times these award-winning companies, they don't ask, what leadership program should we offer? You know, it's more, why must leaders, or what must leaders do differently to deliver this particular business strategy that we've laid out? So instead of asking, what leadership program should we offer, these high-performing organizations are framing it as, what must our leaders do differently, or what must they start doing or perfect doing in order to deliver the business strategy, starting with the end in mind. And it's only then do they design the development experiences and support those particular outcomes, and everything aligns well from that point. Leadership as a business infrastructure. Leadership is not an event. Yes, I'm here at an event, but leadership is not an event. It's an infrastructure. Okay. When leadership development is treated as an event, impact is episodic, right? Which means you have different segmented things, because this particular part of the event needs to happen, or this particular part of the event, something happens so we can forego it. No, if we start treating leadership development as an event, everything becomes episodic, right? But when you treat leadership as a infrastructure, it definitely compounds the impact that one is able to make with the right infrastructure of leadership. Okay. Leadership capability determines, how fast decisions get made, the quality of the decisions that are made. Okay. How well your risk is managed, because oftentimes every industry, every, company has different risks. How are you managing those risks? How are you trying to mitigate those risks or respond to them should something happen? Okay. How resilient is the corporation under pressure? And one of the things I always go back to, circles back to COVID-19 and how that impacted the entire world. It definitely allowed us to look at organizational resilience. And that's why high-performing organizations invest in leadership ecosystems. They invest in leadership infrastructure, not just standalone episodic programs. All right. And don't forget to, share your thoughts, have any comments, add them in the chat. It's okay. And ask any questions and we'll get to them as well. So some metrics that actually move the business, okay? Leadership metrics executives care about, okay? So in the HR Outlook 2026, okay, we emphasize the shift towards outcome-based leadership measurement that is tied to business performance. So these are the metrics that land in the boardrooms. They connect leadership capability to productivity, risk, growth, and continuity. And those metrics include the time to decision. How much time is it taking to make these decisions? The quality of the decisions. Additional metrics, the second one is execution follow through. Okay. We then have leader readiness and critical roles. Very, very important. Performance variance across the teams. And risk exposure from leadership gaps. So all of these combined just shows that HR doesn't need more metrics, just more things to track. We just need metrics that are more aligned to the outcome of the business. The role in reframing leadership development. Now, this is very, very important. So the HR leader's role in reframing leadership development is where we are trying to evolve from them just being a program manager to a capability architect. This is where HR leadership evolves. And don't we like the sound of that? Just from a program manager, so not just being the manager of this particular leadership development program, you are a capability architect. And this role shifts from just managing programs, getting seats in registrations, to actually architecting the leadership capability. And what that means is you're designing the program with the business, not just designing the program for the business. You're partnering early with the finance and the operations team in order to get this program funded and off the ground. And you're measuring impact in terms of, returns that the executives recognize. So being able to have those actual metrics, right, that we're able to measure impact is very important and resonate to the executive team and the board. And this is how HR earns and also keeps a strategic seat at that table where those decisions are made. And we have our final polling question here. So how confident are you that your leadership development metrics resonate with your team of executives and boards? How confident are you about that? Very confident, somewhat confident, not very confident, or unsure because you haven't tested it yet. Would love to see your feedback here. Okay, good. We love to see it. Somewhat confident. Progress is on the way. That's amazing. That's amazing because as long as you know you're doing your best to make that progression forward and able and open to iterating. A lot of times things have to be reiterated over and over again and make some shifts and changes in that progress to make sure that you have the metrics that your team and executives need for your leadership development program. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. And of course, Brandon Hall is in the business of supporting folks and supporting organizations and all the leaders that want to make this shift. Okay. This shift is going from insight to alignment to impact. And the way that Brandon Hall is positioned, okay, we have research-backed frameworks that are research-backed, of course, as mentioned here, and are tried and true. These are from award-winning companies. That is the staple of what work in excellence is. Award-winning benchmarks, okay, and ROI-focused measurement approaches. And here at Brandon Hall, our work, focuses on helping organizations make that shift, right? That shifts from insight to alignment to impact. So we help our HR leaders align their leadership development to business strategy. We help them measure impact in terms of CFO relevant terms. As an ex-CFO myself, I can definitely attest to that. And we help clients help demonstrate the value without losing the human element in all of this. And this is about making leadership development visible where it matters the most. And is taking it again from insight to alignment to impact. When you're able to make that impact, what are you impacting? Employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, business income, like all of the things. So very, very important there. All right. And some key takeaways that if we don't do anything else or leave with anything else, we want to reiterate these few points, right? Activity does not equal impact. So just because you're doing things, it doesn't mean that you're making a difference. Just because you're attending a training, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're using that acquired knowledge into your performance to improve it and make things better. So we have to shift away from activity and start thinking more about impact. Okay. Leadership performance matters more than participation. Again, yes, that's just a continuation of number one. So leadership performance, what you're actually doing, how you're enacting the actual business of leadership, right, is more important than just participating. Okay. Measurement must start with business outcomes. Absolutely. You're starting with the end in mind. And leadership development is enterprise infrastructure. Correct. Leadership development is not just episodic. It's not just an event or a series of events. It is an infrastructure. It's a playbook. Okay. So if you remember nothing else from today, just remember that leadership development succeeds, right, when it changes how the business performs and not just how the leaders feel. Okay. All right. I have a question here. Let me check the chat. Okay, question from Jackie. Going back to your leadership metrics, how do you measure for time to decision, execution flows, follow through, etc.? Okay, great question. Okay, let's see if we can go back to that slide so I can give some examples on there, if that's okay. I can give you some examples. I think it's the next one. It's the one that has the metrics. Yes, that one right there. Leadership metrics executives care about. So we can kind of go through just in general, and we can definitely speak more after as well when it relates to this. But time to decision, okay? this is one of the things that, depending on what industry you're in, depending on what problem or what situation has come up, oftentimes we take too much time to make a decision. So a good example might be where when you're dealing with leadership development, and just because I'm thinking COVID, we'll use COVID as an example. In my industry, back when we were dealing with COVID, one of the things that, for instance, we constantly had to decide, do we, evacuate the nursing home that had the residents in it? Do we just close down a wing, right, or a hallway and move the residents somewhere else? And think about how fast everything was happening and how quickly things were developing in terms of new occurrences of COVID, or maybe more people were getting sicker, or we went from respiratory issues to maybe headaches, just to try to paint that picture. So a time to decision would be where, using the data that you're collecting and using the information that you have and having those specific leaders on your team, instead of trying to make the decision yourself as, let's say, the charge nurse, you want to go ahead and talk to your CNAs that are on the floor. You want to talk to and listen to your LPN. So you're getting everybody involved and quickly saying, okay, I'm not just going to wait until the director of nursing comes in order to make this call. So as you go through your leadership development and you're actually going to execute it, the people that are in charge are able to take in information from others that are impacted or others on the front line and be able to then make a decision quickly. So that's kind of one of the examples of how, when you appropriately take the leadership development and you're able to integrate it into your performance, your decision making happens faster. So in that, let's say you're not waiting for the DON to come in and make a decision. She might not be back until tomorrow at 9. But in the meantime, you're the manager on the floor now. Okay, it's 10 p.m. You just got some positive tests. You need to try to, shift and get that to happen. And what does that do? Help save more lives, help organize the performance on the floor better, and people aren't scattered and going everywhere. So, it's one of those things that's kind of sort of an example of that. If you look at execution follow through, and if we keep with the same example, once all of these moves are physically made, we tend to say, oh, okay, good, I've put out that fire. No. You now have to make sure now, right, and keep watching. Are there any symptoms coming up with the people that you have moved? Is there starting to show signs that other things are happening on this newly found, wing that we've put together? So you want to not just make the decision. Now you want to make sure you follow through in case another decision has to be made. Then you have leadership readiness in critical roles. That's exactly that point. If I have this charge nurse and no one empowered her to care about her decision. She's gone through the trainings. She sat through the in-services, but didn't have what she felt was the power or the ability to actually act on it, to actually implement. And that will make your issue where now she's not going to feel confident enough or won't make the call, and she'll wait for the DON at the expense of all of these other things that can go wrong. So just for the sake of time, hopefully that helped give a little bit more context to that. Okay. All right, we'll go to the next slide here. Okay, so leadership development, okay, that moves the business is intentional, it's measurable, and it's aligned. So I just really want to thank you for your time today. That was a great question as well, asking for more examples. And I want you to think about your leadership, okay? Think about the development strategy surrounding your leadership. And I encourage you to ask in your organizations, can we clearly explain how this particular leadership development program or situation, how does this improve the performance of your business? Okay. And as you ask that question, you start thinking about it. And as you answer, the answer becomes yes, leadership development becomes a strategic asset and not just the line item, not just that cost center item like we talked about before. Okay. Okay, we have about a minute or so for Q&A. Thank you for those of you that added your comments in the box as well. Thank you so much for that. And finally, before we go, remember again, our 2027 HCM Excellence Conference is happening at Hilton West Palm Beach, Florida, January 26th, 27th, and 28th. And also don't forget to think about our BRIC Fall events that are happening, the AI and HR Summit, October 15th of 2026, and the Leadership Summit, November 17th and 18th of 2026, okay? And again, thank you all so much for your time, and thank you for joining me today.